On my birthday, I suffered the most brutal beating of my life. But it was also on this day that I unexpectedly awakened. I transformed from a helpless victim into a being with supernatural powers. Chapter 14. In the blink of an eye, Arya's POV. I sat in the passenger seat and waited for Forrest to appear, so we could go. As I sat there, I thought about me and us in life. I was doing the right thing to trust Forrest? I meant moving into his room seemed like a big leap in the trust department. And I don't trust many people. He was a werewolf after all, and something about Ash seemed off. Something dark. Ash was his best friend, so if Ash is bad, surely Forrest is too. Why do I trust his again? I was pulled out of my thoughts by the arrival of Forrest. He climbed into the driver's side, and we were on our way. I tried asking where we were going, but every time I asked, Forrest just said, "It's a surprise." I don't like surprises, I huffed silently. Before long, though, we reached our destination. The woods. Again. Seriously, just because they're wolves doesn't mean they have to hide out in the woods. This seemed like one of those scenarios where the main character wanders aimlessly into the wood, trusting people she shouldn't, and then dies a horrible, but predictable death. Forrest looked over at me. The woods is full of secrets. Seeing my skeptical expression, he started walking into the woods, and I had no choice but to follow him, or else get lost to the woods. We walked for a few minutes until we came to a clearing, a big stretch of grass and another lake. The grass was full of flowers of every shape, size and color, and the lake was crystal blue with lilies dotted about and colorful pebbles lining the bottom. It was magical. Sky and Ash were already sat on a picnic blanket in the middle of the flowers. They waved us over when they saw us. What is with this wooden lakes? I wrote down on my notepad. The woods belong to all supernatural creatures, and we all happen to love open spaces of water. Forrest answers, confusing me more. "Hey Arya," Ash yelled. "I hear you found out about our deep dark secret." I nod my head and go to sit on the blanket next to Sky. "How are you?" Sky asks, looking concerned. I know it's a lot to take in. I think for a minute before writing down my answer. I want to tell her that I don't trust Ash, but Ash is her mate, so she may hate me for it. "I'm fine," I write down, hesitant to say more. Sky looks at me, like she really doesn't believe me. "How are you really?" she asks again, and I knew I had to tell her. She knew something was up. "Well, it's a lot to take in, and I'm not sure if I can't trust Forrest. I meant he's a freaking werewolf." She laughs at this and looks over to where the boys are, splashing in the lake, catching fish for lunch. "Well, that sounds like a nursery rhyme. You can't trust him. If I can't trust Ash after his past, you can trust Forrest," she says, her voice full of finality. I want to ask her what she meant about his past, but just then the boys come back, both dripping wet but both holding two big fish in their hands with big smiles on their faces. Sky had already collected wood before we arrived, so she just grabbed a match and we started cooking the fish. A highly enjoyable experience in my opinion. After we ate, Sky told me more about Forrest when he was younger, while Ash and first collected more wood to keep the fire burning. Lots of girls fancied him, but he always said he was just for his mate, and no matter how they tried to get his attention, he wasn't interested. I felt pride swell inside of me that my mate never was with anyone else. It made me feel happy that he was mine and mine alone. I was snapped out of thought by the boys coming back with firewood, laughing about something we didn't hear. "You were good for him, you know," Sky says, looking over at the boys. I looked at her, confused, sensing my confusion. She explains, "He used to be really reserved. The expectation of being the alpha's son rested heavily on his shoulders, and he never smiled. But after a small time with you, he's opened up. He's always smiling. You make him happy in a way no one else can." Just then Forrest came and sat next to me, wrapping his arm round my waist. I rested my head on his shoulder, soaking up his warmth. "Come on, it's getting late, we need to head home," Forrest said. I stood up, waved goodbye to Sky and Ash, and walking back to the car. The drive home was quiet but comfortable. As we reached home, I didn't hesitate to head upstairs while Forrest talked to his parents about something. I got changed into my pajamas and slipped into Forrest's bed. waiting for him to come up so I can fall asleep. I heard Forrest come up to his room and going into the bathroom before slipping in bed beside me, pulling me tight against him, kissing my neck. "Good night, Arya," he whispered into my hair as I drifted off to sleep. "I love you." I woke up in the middle of the night. A mysterious cupping sound was coming from the window. Just the wind, I promised myself. But then it came again, this time louder. Wherever I watch horror movies, I always think, I'd survive that. I wouldn't go over and check out the mysterious noise. Yet here I am, going over to the window to see where the noise is coming from. I reached the window and pulled the curtain back, expecting to see someone there, waiting to strike. But I see no one. I turned away from the window and went back to bed. I must have been just imagining it. As I was about to fall asleep, I thought I heard the camera and saw the flash of a picture being taken through my closed eyes. But before I could figure it out, though, I was fast asleep. I woke up early the next morning and just lay there, lost in thought. Forrest was still asleep next to me. His arm had wrapped around my waist as I slept, keeping me next to him, keeping me safe. I propped myself up with my arm and stared down at him. His hair was tousled and stuck up at odd angles from sleep, but he still looked stunning. His eyelids masked his eyes, making his expression unreadable. He held me closer and I lay back down in his arms, savoring his warmth but knowing I needed to get up soon. A few minutes later, I got up for breakfast and walked down into the kitchen, Forrest close on my heels. We entered the kitchen and I grabbed plates while Forrest made some pancakes. I tapped him on the shoulder to get his attention and show him my notepad. "What are we doing today?" He placed the pancakes in front of me before answering. "The children in the school want to see you again, especially Fern. She seemed eager to talk to you again. So, if you don't mind, I thought we could visit the school again." I nodded my head in agreement. I wanted to see the children again as well. Just then Ela and Atlas appeared at the kitchen door. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks and our unfailing patience, enthusiasm," Ela said from the doorway. "Do you have any plans for today?" I nodded and smiled at Atlas as he came into the kitchen with a cup of tea, saying morning as he passed me. "We're going to see the children at the school," Forrest said, going to the sink to do the washing up. "Okay, drive safe," Atlas said as we walked out the kitchen. Just as we reached our room, I remembered what I was going to ask Forrest yesterday. I thought for a minute about how to word it. In the end, I just wrote it straight, before tapping him on the shoulder and showing him my notepad. What did Ash do to make him untrustworthy? Forrest looked startled by my question and it took him a few minutes before he answered. He used to be a rogue, but after he met Sky he changed. How did you know he was ever untrustworthy? He looked at me, confusion evident in his face. I decided to just answer his straight. I was asking Sky if I could trust you, and she said if she could learn to trust Ash, I could learn to trust you. He looked slightly put out. I couldn't trust him, but his expressions softened at Sky's answer. "Well, she's right. I am very trustworthy. And if you don't believe me, I will just have to prove it to you," smiling at me before grabbing some clothes out of his wardrobe and heading to the shower. I laughed before doing the same and heading to the shower in the spare room. I got to the car before Forrest, so I opened the door and turned the radio, thinking about school while waiting for Forrest to arrive. It was the holidays, but now they are nearly over. In less than a week's time, I must go back to school. Back to all the taunting and teasing. Back to Tasha and lessons. Safe to say I was not looking forward to it. Forrest soon arrived, and we set off for the school. Forrest driving and me in the passenger seat. Like always, we pulled into the packed school and first turned the engine off, turning in his seat to look at me. "The children will be out for break time soon. Then the teachers have asked we help the students with some reading, if that's okay with you." I nodded my head. I loved reading, so I would be happy to help others with my passion. I would be happy to help. I wrote on my pad, opening the car door and going to sit on the bench where I met Fern, waiting for the children to come out. Forrest sat down next to me and started doodling on my notepad. I shoved him away. laughing at his little drawing, but he just came back and continued his picture. Soon I joined in and we both drawing a picture. Forrest drew a wolf howling at the moon, so of course I stuck an alien on the moon. And our little game continued like that. One of us would draw something and the other would add a strange detail to the drawing. It was great fun and passed the time until the children came out of school. Suddenly a bell rung, and I was swamped by the kids coming over to hug and ask to play with me. I say ask. They're 7. It was more like demanded. I was happy to see Fen joining the games this time. She ran over to me, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she yelled, crushing me with a big hug. "You were right. I kept hoping my mum is getting better. It's still a long road, but it has got a lot shorter since I last saw you." I smiled down at her, silently yelling with joy. I knew how it felt when you thought your world was crashing and burning at your feet. I was glad the fire had gone out. We spent the rest of break playing, and then I went into the school and listened to the children read. When we left, we promised them we would come back soon. The car ride home was full of joy. I had forgotten my jumper at the school, but we were already halfway home, so the plan was to go back tomorrow to collect it. "Are you sure you don't want to go back for it?" I shook my head. "I'll go back tomorrow and collect it." "Are you sure?" I nodded. The children weren't complaining about us coming back tomorrow anyway. "Well, safe to say. The children love you," Forrest said, a smile on his face. "I thought I was going to have to pull you out of their clutches." I laughed along with him. I felt so happy. In that moment I was content. I was laughing with my mate. The one person who would love me for eternity. The one person who would always keep me safe. But then in a blink of an eye it all changed. One moment I was laughing along with my mate, the road ahead clear and the sun shining. The next a cloud had gone over the sun, cutting off the light that had been lighting the road ahead of us, and the road was no longer clear. In a space of a few seconds my world was spun around. Literally. A huge bang. A crash. A massive impact. A searing pain shot through me. All I could feel was pain. I felt the car buckle as we rolled. I was screaming for my life. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "Help," I screamed, before the darkness engulfed me. Maybe we should have gone back for my jumper. Maybe then the car would have crashed into someone else. We could have turned around. Could have. Would have. Should have. Didn't. Chapter 15. Eyes Everywhere, Arya's POV. I was in my old bedroom. Before my mum left. My mum was sitting on the edge of my bedtime story. When my life was simple. Before my life turned sour. I remember she always told me the same set of stories. They were my favorite, and I wouldn't allow any other story as my bedtime story. It had to be Beatrix Potter. They were the best book in the world. They started my obsession for reading. The stories that came to life for me. My imagination was grown by adventures with Peter Rabbit and Jemima Puddle Duck. I fell asleep clutching a toy Jeremy Fisher in my arms. My favorite character in the whole series. I wouldn't sleep without him. My dad got rid of him not long after Mum left. A flash of bright light made me wince and try to close my eyes tighter, and the pain in my side made me double over. I wanted to go back. I wanted to get away from the pain and burning light and be back with my mum, where I thought life was all sunshine and rainbows. One voice stopped me from slipping away again. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's okay. I promised you I would protect you, and I broke that promise, but please stay with me. Open your eyes. Please. He sounded so sad. Why was he sad? The events in the car came back to me, but they were muddled, in the incorrect order. I couldn't remember what had happened. The bright light went away slightly, and I opened my eyes. Just a crack. I looked around me and saw I was in a hospital. I was about to drift back to sleep when I spotted Forrest. He was covered in cuts and looked in serious need of some rest. I opened my eyes wider and sat up. Wincing in pain, I surveyed the damage. My legs were scratched and covered in cuts, and I had stitches in my arms. I could see where glass had been pulled out of my shoulder and dried blood on the back of my head. All in all, I had had worse. Forrest looked slightly startled that I was awake, but he mainly looked relieved. "You're awake." His eyes teared up. "I thought I'd lost you again." I looked him over and was shocked by how run down he looked. He was covered in blood and he needed serious medical attention. Good thing we were in a hospital, I suppose. "Why haven't you seen a doctor?" "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." My second sentence in 11 years. Forrest looked surprised that I talked again, but didn't answer my question. Instead, it was Atlas who spoke. "I asked the doctor the same thing, but apparently he wouldn't leave your side for long enough to be treated." I stared at Forrest until he put his hands in the air. Fine. I'm going." He walked out the room, finding the doctor treating him. Atlas looked at me for a few seconds before asking the question everyone wants the answer to. "What happened?" I took a big breath in before answering him, piecing together the puzzle of last night. We were driving along back home. Everything was fine. The road was clear, and the sun was shining. And then it wasn't. A car came out of nowhere. It was in the wrong lane and Forrest didn't have enough time to stop. Then everything went dark. I don't know what happened after that. Atlas nodded. "I will get some people to look into it and see if they can figure out what happened." He then handed me a glass of water. "You haven't spoken in years. You need to drink." I nodded my head and drank the water. Forrest told me werewolves have rapid healing, and since I had enough wolf to have a mate, I would heal quicker as well, which I could tell. Most of my cuts had healed, but I still needed rest to heal properly. I was so tired. I just wanted to sleep. Atlas seemed to realize that because he snuck out the room, leaving me to drift away from the hospital into a world with a big brown wolf. He was standing over me protectively, keeping me safe while I slept. I was sure I recognized the wolf from somewhere, but I couldn't remember where. There was something familiar about the shaggy brown coat and bright green eyes, shining with happiness, playfulness and some over-emotions I couldn't place. He walked over to where I stood, and I put my arm out, stroking his big head. His fur was surprisingly soft. He purred at me and I smiled back, still stroking him. I sat down, and he placed his head in my lap, looking up at me, staring into my eyes. I felt like he could see everything about me. He wasn't just a wolf. Of that I was sure. His eyes were filled with such understanding. He understood the hardships of life. He had gone through hardships and come out the other side victorious. I continued sitting there, his head in my lap, just stroking him. It made me feel calm and safe. I woke up the sound of the door opening and a voice whispering to me. I opened my eyes to see Forrest's worried face stood over me. "Are you okay?" Looking me over worriedly. "I'm fine," I said quietly. I couldn't talk much. After so long not talking, I couldn't say much before it started hurting. He came over to me and pulled me into a hug. I was happy to see he was all healed and no longer looked like he would fall over any second. He stared at me in amazement. "So are you talking now?" he asked with a smile on his face. I just shrugged in answer. "I'm glad you're okay," he said before he walked off back where he came from, leaving me to get some rest. After a few hours of waiting and signing forms, we finally got out of the hospital. We all piled into Atlas' car. Forrest had been destroyed in the crash, and went back home. We sat down at the kitchen table and Dita came over and gave us both big hugs, apologizing for not being at the hospital. I was going to come, but one of the children was shifting for their first time and I needed to be there to help. Forrest waved it off and it didn't bother me. Except one detail. "What do you mean?" "Shifting." Slightly hoarsely. Ilya looked at me with a smile on her face. "Are you talking now?" I just shrugged. I really needed to decide. I waited for her to answer the question. Shifting is where the man turns into wolf or vice versa. You shift for your first time when you turn 13, but some people turn earlier and some people later. She turned to smile at me. "If you have any questions about where werewolves, just hassle Forrest. He is your mate, so therefore it is his business to properly educate you. Speaking of educate, Forrest said, turning to me, are we going back to school tomorrow? I shrank away. My brother may have come back, and even if he hasn't, he has plenty of friends to take me down. I started shaking uncontrollably. Can't I go to the pack school? Directing my question at Atlas, hoping I could go to the school we visited, with Fern. But sadly, my life wasn't that good. No, sadly. We tried to transfer you. But apparently, we need to get permission from your dad, and that you probably said they abused you for attention. He looked angry at this. Really angry. Me and Forrest took a step back away from him. But Ida took a step forward. She put her hand at his back and he visibly calmed. I'm guessing that's a mate thing. It's okay. So long as you're with me, it'll be fine. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Smiling at Forrest, he took my hand in his and gave it a light squeeze. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was still really tired, so Forrest and I went up to bed early. As I lay in bed, thinking through what had happened the past few days, I remembered the flash. Just as I was going to bed, I walked up to the window where the flash had come from and pulled open the curtain. There was no one there. Forrest came up behind me and gave me a hug. What's on your mind, Arya? I looked over at him. Should I tell him? Could I tell him? No, I just shook my head. He sighed and pulled me towards our bed. Come on. It's getting late and you're tired. I couldn't argue with the truth. I followed him to our bed and climbed under the covers. Forrest's arms wrapping round me from behind. He made me feel safe, and even if I couldn't tell him about what I thought I saw, he would protect me from it none the less. I woke up in the middle of the night. Forrest wasn't there, but here's someone walking about downstairs. So it is probably him and not a mass murderer who had already murdered Forrest. Wow, I'm positive tonight. I went to the toilet while I waited for Forrest to come back. All the time I had been awake since I got back from the hospital, I had felt like someone was watching me. I finished washing my hands and headed back to bed. I stepped into my bedroom and straight away I knew something was off. I still felt like I was being watched, and it was stronger now. I went over to the window, looked around the garden and screamed. What is it? What's wrong? Forrest came flying upstairs to my side. Too scared to speak. A man. By the window. 2 floors up. Staring at me. As soon as he realized he'd been spotted, he ran off into the woods. Like a shadow. Blending into the trees. First ran to his parents' room and told them what happened. They sent some scouts to try to pick up the scent. But apparently, he didn't have a scent. Is that even possible? I whispered to Forrest. I had read a few werewolf books over my years. Obviously not enough since I'm now living in one. But having no scent. That seemed impossible. No, it shouldn't happen. No one just has no scent. We have school tomorrow. So you need to sleep. My parents will fix it, he said and led me back to bed. I was tired. I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. Dreading school the next day, but knowing Forrest would keep me safe. Wishing I had the same level of trust in his parents and pack as he did. Chapter 16. Happy birthday, bitch. Arya's POV. I woke up to the irritantly loud alarm clock currently blaring on my bedside table. I groaned and rolled over, putting my pillow over my head, trying to block it out. You can't escape it, Arya. Forrest laughed from beside me, turning off the alarm clock and pulling the pillow from over my head. I turned to him and slumped against him, my head on his chest, still half asleep. But it's school. I whined. And it's cold. I don't want to get up. And Forrest laughed before quickly pulling the duvet off me, causing me to shriek as I was hit by the cold air. Oh, you are so for it, I yelled, sleep forgotten as I grabbed the nearest pillow and pummeling him with it, giggling as the feathers flew through the air. I felt arms round my waist as Forrest pulled me down, stopping my pillow rampage. He hugged me tight, kissing me on the forehead and laughing with me. I heard a knock at the door and saw Ela in the doorway. She had a big smile on her face and she was laughing. As fun as it was to watch my son being beaten with a pillow, Breakfast is ready, and you don't want to be late for school. We followed her downstairs and into the kitchen, where a pile of pancakes already sat in the middle of the table. I grabbed a plate and held it high, still grumbling about having to go to school. Atlas grinned at me from across the table. "You sound happy," he observed, laughing at me. "You have no idea." I countered, sprinkling the sugar onto my pancake and squeezing the lemon before looking up. Who on earth thought putting a load of teen in one place for 7 hours a day was a good idea and would anything except catfight? I muttered. Atlas just snorted at my outburst, a smirk on his face as he sarcastically said, "Well, enjoy." "I won't," I deadpanned before eating my pancake. After breakfast was finished and cleared up, Bea went to a jar on the bookshelf and handed us both a £10 note. "Lunch money," she said before going to do the washing up. I just stared at the note in my hand. I had never been given lunch money before. Why do these people I have known a small amount of time so obviously care about me more than my actual family ever did? I said thank you before heading upstairs get dressed for school. Forrest went for a shower and I grabbed a random top from the dresser, not caring what I wore. Today of all days, I just wanted to be alone. I didn't want to go to school. Why of all days would they choose today as the day we go back? Which person decided they hated me enough to make today the first day back? Today, the first day of school. The anniversary of all things bad in my life. The anniversary of my mum leaving. The anniversary of my dad and brother beating me. The anniversary of the day I was born. I felt tears run down my face at the memories of the last 11 years. "Happy birthday, bitch," my brother sneered at me, grabbing me by my hair and throwing me to the ground, laughing as I hit my head off the radiator. I felt blood flow down my neck, but of course he wasn't done yet. He kicked me in the ribs. Grinning a satisfying click of broken bone rang out in the air. I felt my day couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. At that moment my dad came down the stairs. Drunk, he smiled down at me. He kept smiling. He smiled as he punched me in the face. He smiled as he kicked me in my already broken ribs, laughing as I screamed with pain. They left me curled up on the floor with the instructions to have my blood off the floor by the time they got back. Happy birthday to me. I was pulled out of my thoughts as I felt arms wrap around me from behind, pulling me into a tight hug. "Hey, it's okay. Don't cry." I just cried harder, safe in the arms of my mate. After my tears had finally stopped flowing and Forrest had stopped searching for answers as to why I was crying, we set off to school. Note the sarcasm. We pulled into a parking space and I ducked my head down, not wanting people to see me. But of course, this is school. Everyone is too nosy to keep out of your business. Forrest must have seen the worry written all over my face because he leaned close to my ear, whispering in my ear, "Just ignore them." I walked to class followed by whispers. Hurtful whispers. "You see the girl over there? That slut was seen with Forrest. And Forrest must be getting desperate to go to her. Even better, I wonder what she's paying him to shag her. I wouldn't even for £1,000,000. I tried to ignore them like Forrest told me to, but it was hard. The whispers followed me around school and to my lesson. I couldn't get away from them. I wished I was invisible again. To make matters worse, I was still stiff from the car crash and I had odd bruises everywhere. A simple brush against someone in the corridors made me wince in pain. I finally made it to my first class. Oh, kill me now. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sitting next to Tasha, I sighed deeply before sitting down at my desk. Maybe, just maybe, she will leave me alone. Oh, who am I kidding? As if. As soon as she sat down, in the seat right next to me, she sneered. Then she turned to me, and what she said sent a chill down my spine and made me quake in my seat. "I have a message from your brother." "Oh no, please no." She slipped me a note and my hands shook as I read it. "Happy birthday, bitch. Sorry I couldn't be here to celebrate it with you, but I gave Tasha and my friends my gift to give to you, so you won't miss out." My teacher was talking at the front of the class, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. All I could focus on is the note, My brother's note. This isn't over. Far from it, in fact. I will be back in one day. One day soon you will pay dearly. So, dear sister, sit tight and live in an illusion of safety. The fact of the matter is you are far from it. The rest of the lessons were a blur of looking over my shoulder and shaking in fear. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't want them to find out that I was talking again. There would be too many questions to answer. I walked through the back door to get out of school. I had to see one of my teachers after school, so most people had already left. As I walked across the field, I suddenly noticed I was no longer alone. There were people all around me. Not normal people. Tyler's friends. I tried to get away, but before I could, I was surrounded with my hands pinned behind my back. I tried to wriggle out of the death grip, but it was too tight. Happy birthday, bitch. One of the boys said from behind me before the sky rained down with punches and kicks. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could feel was pain. Not just physical pain, but mental pain. The pain of 11 years of painful memories all crashing down in one moment. Hey Dad. 6-year-old me ran up to my father and engulfed him in a hug. Daddy, can I go to the park tomorrow? Not fazed by the fact he wasn't hugging me back. He just glared into the distance. Not looking at me. No, he gruffly told me. It's your fault. All your fucking fault. He screamed at me. I cowered away from him. Who was this strange man, and where had my loving father gone? I whimpered as he turned his gaze at me. If looks could kill, I would surely be dead. It was my birthday. Every year on the nearest Saturday to my birthday, my dad would take me to the park. It was tradition. I didn't understand what had happened. I didn't know my mum had left a few hours ago. Or that my dad blamed me. How could I? I was only 6. It's your fault. It's your fault. He repeated, again and again, his voice rising in volume until I had my hands over my ears and tears streaming down my face. What had I done wrong? I didn't understand what I had done. Why did my dad suddenly hate me? I whimpered again and tried to run from the room. He grabbed the back of my shirt and pulled me back, stopping me in my tracks. He glared at me before raising the glass bottle in the air and crashing it down on my head. Glass sprayed everywhere, and I screamed in pain. My dad laughed. Chapter 17, Talking but Not Listening, Forest POV. I had to go to see my geography teacher after school. She said I had to catch up on the work I missed at the end of last term. As I was walking back to my car, hoping Aria had waited and not walked home, I heard some strange sounds coming over from the field near the woods. I walked over to see what was going on and saw Tyler's goons surrounding Aria. They were causing her pain, and before I could comprehend what was going on, my wolf took control, shifting to protect our mate. Tasha was the first one to spot me. She went as white as a sheet and shook in her boots. I smiled at this. My wolf loved scaring her. I would do anything to protect my mate. Soon they had stopped hitting Aria and were all looking over at me. I looked at all of them, remembering who it was. They would pay for this. All it took to get rid of them was a growl. One snarl and they were out of there. They ran from one end of the field to the other in a matter of seconds. Ignoring them, I went into the woods to shift. Luckily, we keep clothes all over the woods, so it didn't take me long to find some, and I ran back to Aria. She was covered in cuts and bruises and seemed to have passed out. I carried her to my car and lay her on the back seats as I drove home. My wolf growled in anger at those who would harm our mate, but I calmed him down before I ended up with a wolf driving a car. That wouldn't go well. I reached home and the first thing I did was carry Aria up to our room. Again. By the time I was downstairs again, my parents had figured out most of what happened, but I answered any question they had. Apart from one. Why did they do it? I asked for the billionth time. Still no closer to getting the answer. My parents both shrugged. They had no idea, because Tyler told them to. I whipped round at the sound of Aria's voice and saw her at the bottom of the stairs, looking tired. I should have smelt her much sooner. I'm a wolf after all, but I was too caught up in finding the answer to my question I let my guard down. He gave me a note. She handed it to my dad and I wrapped her in my arms. She was shaking. My dad let out a feral growl as he read the message. "What a twitch," he yelled, causing Arya to hide behind me. My dad passed the note to my mum, trying to calm down. "I'm sorry for scaring you, Arya. I was just so angry at the way they thought they could treat you." Arya just nodded her head in understanding. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," my mum said, looking confused. "Is it your birthday today?" I must have looked confused because my mum handed me the note. "Happy birthday, bitch." I looked over at Arya and she nodded, her head hanging low. "Why didn't you tell us?" my dad asked, carefully approaching the subject she probably didn't want to tell us. Arya took a deep breath and grabbed my hand before telling us her story. "My mum left on my birthday. I was turning 6 and she promised me we would all go to the park the next day as a family like always. But when I got back from school my mum was nowhere to be seen. I asked my dad about going to the park and he started screaming about how it was all my fault. That was the first time her ever hurt me. He smashed a glass bottle over my head. Every year after, on my birthday, my dad and brother would beat me even worse than other days. It became tradition. My birthday became the anniversary of my mum leaving and a world of pain. That's why I don't speak. It reminded me of my life before my mum left, so I stopped speaking. My dad always hit me more if I made a sound. So it was a win-win, I suppose. Before long I just never spoke. And my dad told people I was a mute. I suppose I was. I was shaking with the need to kill them. Her dad and brother for hurting her and her mum for leaving a 6-year-old on her birthday. Looking across could see my dad was having the same problem. He was an alpha and I was an alpha's son. The desire to protect our own ran deep. I pulled Arya into a tight hug, simultaneously comforting her and calming my wolf. "It's okay. I will keep you safe." She nodded into my chest and I pulled her impossibly closer. That night I lay in bed, holding my mate close, breathing in her scent. My dad had found out the car crash hadn't been an accident. The car had no driver. It had been remotely controlled to drive out in front of us. So we crashed. Something big was at work here. Someone wanted either me or my mate dead. I wouldn't let them hurt my mate. "I'm sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Hugging her tight to me. "What for?" Arya asked, turning in my arms to face me. "I should have been there sooner. You are mine to protect and I let you get hurt." I hung my head in shame. She's my mate and I let her get hurt. I felt a hand under my chin, raising my face to look her in the eyes. "There is nothing to apologize for. You didn't know and I wouldn't expect you to. You did your best and you were there in the end. That's all I ask, that you always come back for me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I answered before hugging her close and letting her drift off to sleep. I felt so sorry for all my mate had had to go through. She had been through so much. Probably more than she let on. I wished I could do more for her, but all I could do was cherish her and keep her as happy as I could. I would give up anything to make her happy. I fell asleep with my mate in my arms, dreaming of a time when her dad and brother no longer bothered her and her past no longer affected her. I woke up with the alarm blaring and Arya hiding from it. I laughed as I turned off the alarm and pulled the pillow off her head. I smiled down at her, but the smile she gave in return wasn't an altogether happy one. "Hey, what's wrong?" I questioned, worry thick in my voice, looking her in the eyes so she couldn't lie to me. She twitched under my gaze, shifting her eyes from the window to her hands in her lap. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "I just have a headache. That's all." I frowned down at her. Something isn't right. My wolf growled at me. "Keep an eye on her today." We walked down for breakfast and I grabbed some paracetamol from the cupboard, handing it to Arya before sitting down at the table with my parents, grabbing some toast and Nutella. I could see my parents share a look of concern about Arya. She did look terrible. Her skin was pale, and her eyes showed a slight squint of pain. Are you okay, Arya? My mum asked. Do you want a day off school? Arya just shook her head. It's okay. It's only a headache. Nope, my wolf said. It's so much more than that. I just can't put my finger on what. We got ready for school and got in the car. Arya still looked ill, but she wouldn't admit it. I tried to ask her, but she just said she was fine. Just a headache. I checked my planner. My first lesson was PE. Arya wasn't in my class, so I couldn't keep an eye on her. I got changed into my PE kit and walked out the changing room, ignoring the swooning girls throwing themselves at me. Pathetic. The only girl for me is my mate. Tasha came up to me and tried to talk to me, but I just brushed her off. Not in the mood to talk to her. My wolf was still worried about Arya, and I was too. She looked so pale, and although she said it was just a head, she must have been lying. I've never seen anything like it. Finally, after a few lessons of teachers blabbering about something and me not listening, I reached English, my only class with Arya today. I walked in and sat in my usual seat, in the back corner, and waited for Arya to come in. A few minutes later, Arya entered the classroom. She looked worse than she did this morning. Her skin was deathly pale, and her cheeks were adorned with a slight tint. She came to her seat and put her head on the desk, quietly complaining about a headache and that everything was too loud and too bright. The lesson went on, and Arya kept her head on the desk, her eyes closed shut against the light that had no effect on anyone else. I was trying to pay attention to the teacher, but I kept glancing at Arya. She should have stayed off today. And now get into threes to find the definition of the words on your sheet. I only heard half of what my teacher told us to do. What sheet? What words? Just then Tasha came over to me. Seems like we're a group then. Sitting in the chair next to me and leaned into my arm. I shivered in disgust and grabbed the sheet, looking over at Arya, who had opened her eyes at the sound of Tasha's voice, her expression impossible to decipher. I read through the sheet, trying to ignore the way Tasha pulled her shirt down slightly, as if I would ever be with someone like her. What does crepitation mean? Looking at the sheet and not at her. I don't know. A slight frown on her face that I was ignoring her and doing the work instead. What about crepuscular or undulation? Continuing to ignore her as much as possible. Just forget the stupid words. Who would ever use them anyway? I only can in the group to ask you to go on a date with me. So hurry up and say yes and kiss me already. Annoyed, before I could say no in the nastiest way possible, my wolf was suggesting, never in a million years, bitch, or possibly you wanna get away from me, you fucking pile of shit. I may need to have a word with him about language. Arya sat up and launched herself from the desk on top of Tasha. I looked at Arya and was scared by the expression over her face. It was as if she wasn't fully there. Her eyes were darting all over the room. She was acting as if she had been drugged. With one final shake, she jumped off Tasha and ran out of the classroom. I ran after her but lost her as she left school. I pulled out my phone and called my parents. Something's wrong with Arya. She's been complaining things have been too loud and colors have been too bright all day. But she suddenly started attacking Tasha and has now run out of school. I don't know where she's gone. I don't know what to do. She was acting all wrong, as if she was drugged. My dad from the other side of the phone just told me to try to follow her. He would look into if anyone had drugged her, had anything to do with the man at the window. Chapter 18. Pain. Pain and more pain. Arya's POV. I woke up to the alarm blaring in my ear and a headache in the base of my skull. I used to get headaches a lot when I was younger, so I knew this one was going to be a bad one. I threw a pillow over my head and waited for Forrest to turn off the alarm. I heard Forrest laugh as he pulled the pillow off me and his face came into view, smiling above me. He looked so happy and knew I was blessed beyond measure to have a mate like him. I tried to return his smile, but I could feel my headache getting stronger, so it wasn't a completely happy smile. Hey, what's wrong? Forrest asked, worry thick in his voice. I felt bad for worrying him. I was still getting used to the fact that he actually cared about me. I'm fine. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, trying not to wince at the sunlight coming from the curtains, making my headache worse. I just have a headache. That's all. Forrest's face showed that he didn't believe me, and from the spaced-out look on his face I'm guessing he was talking to his wolf. We walked down to breakfast and Forrest grabbed some paracetamol from the cupboard, handing it to me before grabbing some breakfast. As I grabbed my own breakfast, I saw Atlas and Ida share a look of concern. I suppose I did look terrible. My skin pale as a ghost and my face contorted in pain. The headache was going to be a really bad one. "Are you okay, Arya?" Oe asked me. "Do you want a day off school?" I quickly shook my head. I didn't want to worry them. And I had worse pain from beatings. I would survive. "It's okay. It's only a headache." We got ready to go and I packed some more paracetamol into my bag for later. Forrest again asked me if I was okay, but I didn't want to worry him, so I just said I was fine. It was only a headache after all. My first lesson was computing. From the window I could see the PE changing rooms and I could see all the girls swooning over Forrest. My heart clenched with anger at the sight of them. Wait, what? Since when did I care? They are just stupid girls. I was confused. Why did I care? Maybe it had something to do with my headache. It has been gradually getting worse ever since I woke up. I could see annoyed Forrest's face when Tasha came over and I was filled with pride as he ignored her and brushed her off. After a few hours of lessons and my headache getting worse, it was time for English with Forrest. I dragged myself to my seat. Forrest sent me a reassuring smile, which I tried to return. Just sitting next to him made me immediately feel a bit better. The light shining through the window made me squint and the noise pounded up my head, causing me to wince. I put my head on the desk, blocking out as much light and sound as possible. Everything was too loud, too bright. The lesson went on and I kept my head on the desk, ignoring everyone and everything. I heard the teacher tell us to get into threes, but I didn't move. I just stayed with my head on the desk. It was only when I heard Tasha's annoying voice from nearby that I opened my eyes. Seems like we're a group then. Rubbing herself against Forrest, something in me surfaced. I didn't like her near my mate. I watched Tasha try to seduce Forrest, getting angrier and angrier. And when Tasha told Forrest to kiss him, something inside of me finally snapped. My eyes flashed, and my actions didn't feel like my own. I jumped over the table and on top of Tasha. I kept gaining control over my limbs but then losing it again. I had no control over what I was doing. I heard Forrest from beside me shout in confusion and the teacher from the front of the class tell me to stop. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't care. All I cared about was stopping Tasha from taking my mate away from me. Something inside of me yelled mine. Not hers, mine. It kept yelling. Every punch and slap was fueled by the voice. Mine. Finally, I managed to get control for long enough to get off Tasha and I fled from school. I ran, and I ran, and I ran. I didn't get tired and I couldn't stop. I could see the world glide past me. I could see everything, hear everything and smell everything. It was unnerving, and my head was still pounding. I'm sorry, I heard a small voice in my mind. Wait, what? I don't want to do this, but I have to. It's the only way. Suddenly I lost control of my limbs again, and was running in a different direction. What do you mean? What don't you want to do? What are you doing? I'm sorry that I attacked Tasha, but she had no right to flirt with Forrest and I don't want to do this because it will scare and hurt you. But I have to. Before I could ask what it meant, an agonizing pain came over me. The pain steadily increasing, becoming more powerful and more excruciating, building and layering until I thought I was going to die. I wanted Forrest. I wanted to go home. I wanted to be back sitting round the kitchen table with Ely and Atlas, laughing and having a good time. Something that never happened with my dad but happened all the time with Atlas, Ely and Forrest. Every bone, muscle, tendon, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Capillary, cell, molecule, and atom in my body felt like it was on fire. I felt like every bone in my body had been shattered and been shoved back in places they didn't belong. I was sure I was going to die. Then my world turned black. Forest's POV, I ran after her. Out of school. On to the field and beyond. I could hear the teachers yelling after me, telling me to stop. But I couldn't. I had to find her. I was lost without her. I needed her. I had picked up her scent heading into the woods, but it was fading fast. She had run randomly. Seemingly unaware of her surrounding, I was worried she wasn't fully there. I found my way deep in the woods. I knew I was heading near my pack territory, but I still couldn't find Arya. I followed her scent until I was about a mile away from home, but then I lost it. Maybe she went back home, my wolf suggested. I didn't have any better ideas, so I ran back, hoping she would be there. She wasn't. I reached home faster than ever before, but all I found were my parents' worried expressions. They had been looking as well, but she was nowhere to be found. Just then my dad, a phone call from the pack. A rogue was found on the edge of pack territory. My dad said, after disconnecting the phone. Why are they calling us? My mama asked. They know what to do when rogues turn up. I shook my head. I had much more important things to deal with. My dad sighed before answering. The rogue won't shift back and has a very unique smell. Not part of a pack, but not a full rogue. They don't know what to do with it. He turned to me before continuing. We will check out the rogue. You continue looking for Arya. I nodded my head before heading out to search for her scent. Arya's POV? I woke up confused and scared. The pain had gone. Even my headache had fully gone. But something wasn't right. I looked down and I almost screamed. I wasn't human. I was a wolf. I looked into the river and saw my reflection. I was a black wolf with ginger and white stripes. Before I could figure out what to do, something came barreling into my side, and I went flying to the side, crashing into a tree. A man came over to me, standing over me, a glare on his face. Shift back. He told me. I didn't know what he was on about. How do I shift back when I don't know how? I thought back to when Ela told me what shifting was, but she didn't tell me how to shift back. Shift back, he repeated, but I still didn't know how. I tried to tell him, but I couldn't find my voice. I started to panic. What could I do? Where was Forest? Where was I? However hard I tried, I couldn't tell him I didn't understand. This one won't cooperate. And it smells weird. What should we do? What was he on about? I wasn't trying to be difficult, but I didn't understand what he wanted me to do and what did he meant I smelt weird. Call the Alpha. He'll know what to do. Another man said from beside me. The first man pulled out a phone and called someone. Alpha, we have a bit of a problem here. A rogue has strayed onto our territory, but it won't shift back. And it smells strange. It doesn't belong to a pack but doesn't smell of rogue. What should we do? His words confused me. I knew what an alpha was. Forrest had explained that his dad was the alpha of his pack and his mum was the Luna, and I knew what rogues were. They were evil wolves with no pack. But I didn't understand how I was a part of this. The Alpha and Luna are coming. Let's get it locked up in a cell for questioning. I was picked up by the scruff of my neck and dragged into a dark room. I was thrown into a cramped cell with no windows. I lay on my tummy, waiting for whoever it was who was coming to question me to come. I knew Atlas was an alpha and he was nice. But I also know he's a nice father, whereas my dad wasn't. Just because one father is a good doesn't mean they all were. Just because Atlas is an ice alpha didn't mean they all are. Suddenly the door crashed into the wall and a huge amount of power came storming down the hall. The Alpha and Luna were here, and the power was something I've never experienced before. I heard a familiar voice yelling, "Where's the rogue?" BTW for anyone wondering. I looked down, I almost screamed. I wasn't human. I was a wolf is what made my sister think of a screaming fox. Chapter 19, Locked Up Arya's POV. Atlas came storming over to the cage I was trapped in, closely followed by Ela. He would help me. He would let me out and take me home. It would all be okay. Or so I thought. So, this is the rogue you were telling me about. He looked me over and took a deep breath in. You're right, it does smell weird. It's not part of a pack, but she doesn't smell like a rogue. Where did you find it? One of the guards who had surrounded my cell since I was thrown in answered. On the east side of the territory. It ran from the woods. About 4 o'clock this evening. He looked over at me and the rage I saw burning in his eyes shattered all dreams of him saving me. That's when and where Arya was last spotted. What have you done to her? I curled up in a tight ball, my head on my paws, hoping Forrest would forgive me for leaving him, not being able to tell Atlas that I didn't do anything to Arya. I was Arya. The men surrounding me looked confused. Not many knew who Arya was, who I was, but it was someone the Alpha clearly cared about, so they didn't question it. One of the men from the woods came over and glanced at me in disgust. We told it to shift, to ask it some questions, but it refused. I growled at him. I didn't refuse. I didn't know how to shift. I still don't know how to shift. Atlas looked me over one more before he said the words that would seal my fate. Well, if it won't cooperate, we have no further use of it. You can dispose of it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and yell at me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm not a rogue, but all that came out were yips and barks. Wait, Ila's voice from the corner of the room startled me. I had forgotten she was here. Something about it. Well, I think I recognize it. Something about its scent. Maybe I still had a chance. Keep it locked in this cell until we figure out who it is, Atlas ordered, before walking out the room with Ila. The guards all glared at me, their eyes full of disgust and hate. I hope I get out of here soon. I lay my head on my paws. Why didn't Tila and Atlas recognize me? They said my scent was familiar, but according to Forrest they should know it's me by my scent. Something that Tila came back to me. When werewolves shift, their scent changes. It still has some of their original scent, but it is mixed with the scent of their wolf. That's why they don't recognize me. I have to shift back for them to recognize me. That can't be too hard, can it? I'm your wolf and I got us captured. I just wanted to go home, to be with our family. But now we're stuck in this cage and no one knows where we are. It's okay. Do you know how to shift back? Then we will easily get out of here. No, I only know how to shift, not how to shift back. Your parents are supposed to teach you that. I don't know how. Oh no, we're never getting out. I'm going to be stuck here forever. What if we never see Forrest again? No, I've got to stay positive. I will work on shifting back and getting Atlas and Ela to recognize me. I can't give up. Every day was the same in the cells. I hadn't seen Ela since the day I got caught, and I only ever got a glimpse of Atlas as he passed by my cell. Always in a hurry. The guard rotated every 3 hours. At rotations a day. I got to know the 8 guards quite well. Most of them seemed half decent, but still wouldn't let me out. I guess they're just doing their jobs. But one guard, the one I had from midnight to 3 a.m., was horrible. Horrible doesn't quite fit in. He was horrendous. Heinous. Disgustingly cruel. And he hated me. Every day. As he got on his shift, he made sure to drop my food all over the floor. Oops, he'd say. Clumsy me. I only got 1 meal a day. At midnight. And it was off the floor. I had to lick up the water from the dusty floor, cutting my tongue and drinking more dirt than water. Sometimes he would eat my food in front of me, just to show me he could. Then, when the clock struck 1 a.m., and the other guard shift was finished, the torture started. Mostly it would be whipping, or cutting my pelt with his penknife, or throwing glass at me. It all reminded me of being at my dad's, bringing forth memories I wished I could forget. Once a day, for 2 hours straight, he would torture me. Atlas was a good alpha. He didn't know what the guard did. He hid it well, only doing it at night and only doing it at places that you would have to look closely to see. Every day, as the clock struck 3, he would turn to me grinning wickedly and say, "You can't tell anyone about this. Even if you did shift, no one would believe a lousy rogue over me. I am the top guard after all." Every day he said that, and every day my determination grew to learn how to shift back. No one would believe a lousy rouge, but they might believe Forrest's mate. I wish Forrest could be here, to save us again. My wolf whimpered. I wished I could see Forrest again. I just want to go home. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Elia and Atlas gave me the home I've never had. Even when my mum was still with us, it was still only a house. But now, with Forrest, I've been given a home. That day when Atlas and Ela let me stay was the day my life changed forever for the better. I finally found the meaning of a family, of a home. Halfway through my torture, the guard phone rang. I heard over the line asking for his help with a rouge problem. "This isn't over," he said before he ran off, and I was alone again. My wolf disappeared from my mind to try to heal us, and I drifted off to sleep. I woke up when someone came into my cell. It was Ela. "Hello. It's okay. I won't hurt you." Looking me up and down. "Now where do I know you from?" Muttering to herself. "Please. I want to go home. Please." But of course, like every time I tried, no one understood me. "Are you a boy?" I shook my head. "Are you a girl?" I nodded. I hoped I could get my message across, but however hard I tried, I couldn't think of a way to say I'm your son's mate. "Do you know how to shift?" And I quickly shook my head. I needed to know so I could go home. Just imagine being in human form. Everyone's trigger thought is different. Some people think about their toes, or fingers, or human skin. I tried everything she told me, but it didn't work. I didn't shift back. "Keep trying and you'll manage it soon. Then come talk to me and we can figure out where you came from. I don't think you are a rogue." I lay down, my head resting on my paws, wishing I was back with my mate. Soon I would figure out how to shift, and then I would go home. Forrest's POV. I still couldn't find her. Every day I went out searching for her scent. I had found it on the edge of our territory, but then the patrol had gone over it and it had gone missing. I hadn't found it since then. I had searched all over the woods and even checked inside the territory, in case she had gone there. But I still couldn't find her. Once again, I arrived home with Arya still missing and still no hints as to where she could be. My parents were discussing the rogue in the cells, the one they thought might know something about Arya but won't cooperate. And since I couldn't find Arya, I decided to see if I could help. I sat down at the kitchen table with a sigh. The once lively chatter that flew round the table silenced. Everyone was worried about Arya. We didn't know what to do. "Why don't you just kill it?" They should be helping me find my mate, not try to identify a stupid rogue. "Because," my dad said, confusion and stress evident on his face, "we know her from somewhere and we don't want to kill her before we know who she is." My mum looked over at me, her face full of pity. "Why don't you come see her? You might know who she is." As if I don't hang around with rogues. I went upstairs, bored of this conversation, wishing my mate was beside me. I threw myself down on our bed, breathing in her faint scent left on the pillow. God, I missed her so much. I knew I had been rude to my parents, and I was being unfair to the poor rogue who was in our cells, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not until my mate was safely by my side.